Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Dubai Works Business Podcast. This week, I've got a very interesting guest. And here is Matthew Benjamin. He's the British founder of Kapes. They are a homegrown sustainable school uniform brand. So Matthew, using his experiences from working with menswear tailor Benjamin Siggers and custom clothing company Tom James, Benjamin, decided to take his learnings into developing sustainable school uniforms. Interesting business idea. Benjamin and his co-founders Seb Francis and Mike Bennett, they were able to raise investment needed to launch Kapes during an uncertain COVID-19 pandemic and ready for the back-to-school period of September 2020 by offering schools, parents, and children ethically made school uniforms free from harmful chemicals. So today on the show, we'll talk about the Cape story, and we'll also talk about how to build a modern retail company and all things sustainable fashion.
Right.
Good afternoon. Hi, Benjamin. Thanks for joining.
You got it right the first time. So it's Matthew Benjamin.
Matthew.
I do get called Benjamin quite a lot.
Oh, so sorry.
That's all right. I mean, I've had clients for the past 7-8 years that some still will refer to me as Benjamin.
Okay, two first names.
Exactly, two first names.
Many people have a first name as a second name, but they're just two very first names.
Yeah, exactly. But it works well when we started Benjamin Siggers because my co-founder James, his surname is Siggers.
Okay.
Mine's Benjamin, but it sounds like
it does.
Benjamin Siggers sounds like a person.
Oh, so you were the co-founder of Benjamin Siggers as well.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So it's the first time on this podcast that we've had someone really from the tailoring, the menswear sector. So can you talk about your experience in your career
So it started in 2010 in London. Prior to that, I'd done an MBA in luxury management. So I was over in Monaco for a year. And touched on all aspects of luxury. When I came back to London, at the time I wanted to work in the yacht industry. So I wanted to actually go into selling super yachts, so yachts over 25 meters. And I started working for a yacht marketing company. It was a startup. And then sort of like a year into it, kind of figured it wasn't the way that I wanted to go. It was just after the financial crisis. The industry was really impacted. So I started looking at other opportunities and kind of fell into the role at Tom James, which is the world's largest custom tailoring company. But not a lot of people know about Tom James because it is direct to consumer. There's no marketing, but it's a vertically integrated powerhouse in the tailoring industry.
So just on that one, when you say custom tailoring, are we talking about Savile Row sort of bespoke fittings?
So bespoke suits, mainly for men. So with Tom James, the clothes are made in America, but in terms of the premise of it, it's very similar, depending on the levels of construction to a Savile Row made garment.
Okay, so that was in line with your kind of luxury high-end background, and it was interesting.
Exactly. So that luxury high-end background. Prior to that, all of the roles I'd done were customer facing. I enjoyed that, that selling side of things, and working with clients on a face-to-face basis. So it sort of combined those two things. That's how it started. 2010 in London.
Okay.
My area at the time was Mayfair, so we all had different areas to focus on. Mine was Mayfair, St James.
But they did have a storefront.
No, so it was all. We visited all of our clients.
Okay.
So we worked from an office in Bank, and we would go out and visit all of our clients. So essentially, my day would be split up as go into Bank in the morning, and then I would head off to Mayfair or spend half a day in Mayfair visiting clients, unless I was referred outside of Mayfair. But generally, I'd be there, and then I'd go back to the office in Bank in the afternoon, and start making phone calls and booking appointments and setting up the diary for the rest of the week or month.
Interesting industry. So basically, your clients are male or female? Mainly male.
Mainly male, yeah.
So they're in offices or in their homes in Mayfair, and you come as a sale, or do you actually do the fitting and everything, the tailoring?
Yeah, do the fitting as well. So we would do everything apart from actually make the garment. So It's generally guys that are working in, i.e., Mayfair or in the city. Guys that are cash rich but time poor. They need to look good for work. It's not necessarily a fashion statement, but it's important for them to project the right image, and they just don't have the time to actually to go to the shop. So yeah.
Average price of a suit in Ben James?
So at Tom James, I mean, it's similar to Benjamin Seegers. I mean, our average sale is $2,800, just like in dirhams, like 10,000 dirhams, something like that.
Yeah. So not high end.
So expensive enough. I mean, it's a niche product.
Yeah.
With most guys, a suit is going to be the most expensive thing in their wardrobe.
Yeah.
Spending £1,200 on a suit, or with Benjamin Seegers, our suits start at 5,000 dirhams and go up from there.
Yeah.
But spending 10,000 dirhams isn't a small amount of or insignificant amount of money.
So you came here, exactly. So you came here in 2012. You mentioned before we started chatting, and you set up Benjamin Seegers. I'm going to keep getting the names mixed up. and then you so you did that, the same concept as what you were doing in London.
Benjamin Seegers was a little bit later. So started in London at Tom James, but at the time they didn't have an office in the Middle East. So I'd approached them with the idea of setting up an office in Dubai. So put together a business plan, and then I had certain targets to hit.
Why Dubai?
Because it had so much potential.
How did you know where you?
So I had some friends that lived in Dubai. I'd visited Dubai. I'd visited the UAE twice before. Once was on a cricket tour.
Did you play?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
So my club, we came out here, and we were based in Sharjah, but we had a few games dotted about.
Yeah.
And then I came here 2008, I think it was, or 2009. So I was doing some research for my thesis, which was
about luxury boats.
Yeah, I was looking at a partnership between a marina and a yacht brokerage company and how that could work. And I came out here and did some interviews with Aldar Marinas.
Yeah.
So that was the second time I'd come, but it was obvious it had like so much potential, and it seemed like this exciting place, and it had a buzz about it. And at Tom James in London, we were still working with clients who were based here. And they would, still use us in London because they couldn't find the equivalent in terms of quality and service. So it just seemed like a no-brainer. And then, no tax as well. That was an incentive to set it up here as well.
So how did that transition happen to the other company?
So came out here 2012. Spent a few years at Tom James building that business up, and then it was 2017. Which then led on to setting up Benjamin Seegers. So one of the things I, came to know as I became more knowledgeable about the manufacturing processes, it then also became evident that I was working for one of the most unsustainable, companies as well. Trying to implement change at a company that had been going for, decades and was so large, it's pretty difficult. That's what essentially then led on to starting Benjamin Seegers. But using the same business model, but with sustainability being a core part of it, and looking at how can we solve that problem and reduce our impact as much as possible.
Yeah. So this is the start of the sustainability element. I think it's important to know that, which I was quite intrigued by, that, and you'll get the statistic right, but this tailoring business or clothing is the second most impact. Can you?
Yeah. So fashion. Yeah. So not tailoring, essentially, but fashion as a whole it's been dubbed as the second most polluting industry in the world.
Wow.
It's definitely one of the most polluting industries in the world. It accounts for a massive amount of emissions. So
a lot of that is to do with the manufacturing, but also the distribution and the transportation.
Yeah, the distribution and transportation, but at the materials level is where a lot of the impact is.
Wow.
So using things like virgin synthetics, like your polyesters, nylons, things like that, which are oil-based materials, contributes a lot.
What's the most impact? What's the worst pollution?
So,
Oil or travel?
well,
Industry? Sorry.
oil and gas.
Oil and
Yeah,
gas,
yeah.
yeah.
Oil and gas is only one ahead of
Yeah.
fashion. It kind
Wow.
of puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
It's a really impactful industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of overconsumption,
Mm.
overproduction. There's a lot of elements that are there that need to be improved, really,
Mm.
if we're going to fight the climate crisis.
So how did you do? So you mentioned in London with the name of that company.
Yeah, there's a lot of first names.
I'm just gonna play it safe from now on. So basically, you mentioned that you weren't doing the manufacturing. So you actually didn't see how it was done. Where was it done?
So the first company was done in America.
Mm.
So we visited those manufacturing facilities and
Yeah.
seen it being produced.
Yeah.
But all of that was done there. Then the product would arrive. Then we would go and do fittings. We then make the alterations in house, and then deliver the final garment.
Okay, and then when you were here with Benjamin Siggers, when you set that up,
Yeah.
you were actually more hands on with the
So more in terms of the process of choosing manufacturers.
Okay.
So again, manufacturing is outsourced. So 90% of our garments are made in Italy. But it was a case of at that time, okay, going to meet manufacturers, seeing if their vision was aligned with us. How did we get on with them? Like, what was the actual product like? And that was an amazing experience. Like going to Italy and jumping in a Fiat Panda and literally driving around Italy, meeting suppliers, and I remember us saying at the time, we'll probably look back on those experiences. We took a picture of that car. I remember just a tiny little Fiat Panda.
Wow, it's a cool story. But so Italy, like we obviously know that Italy's an amazing fashion country, and it's we can think of lots of kind of famous fashion designers from Italy, and Fashion Week and everything like that. But from a production point of view, is it that it's got good garments and good quality, or good factories?
Yeah, so particularly from a tailoring perspective, they have a real specialization in that area, and they're really known for soft tailoring. So like our garments are really light and easy to wear, and that's the kind of Italian feel, as opposed to other forms of tailoring which are a bit more sort of regimented and a bit harder and heavier materials and things like that.
But evidently not very sustainable in Italy.
I mean, in terms of sustainability, that's the world over. Tailoring itself, is more sustainable than other areas of fashion, because you buy a suit and it's going to be in your wardrobe for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, even more. And where the unsustainable side of fashion sort of comes in is really a lot of it is a fast fashion side of things. Where you're just buying and disposing. So tailoring naturally is more sustainable, but then we've still got to look at what materials are used and how it can be improved.
Yeah. Okay, so much to talk about there, but I don't want to go too slow because there's more to this story. So after you were doing Benjamin Singers in Dubai, kind of what happened next, and how did we get to Kapes?
So Kapes, and so with suits, as I mentioned earlier, it's a niche industry. There's only a certain amount of guys that are going to spend upwards of 5,000 dirhams on a suit, or upwards of 900 dirhams on a shirt. So you are catering to a small amount, of guys. So although there was positive impact there, for me, in terms of solving problems, I wanted to have a much bigger impact. So with uniforms, that was something that was on my mind for a while, but it wasn't until the pandemic happened and really slowed everything down and gave me an opportunity to just stop for a minute and think about where it is that I wanted to go, as an entrepreneur, and what I really wanted to do, and having that impact, which then led on to uniforms, because uniforms, they're between the age of 4 or 5 and 16 to 18. They're what we wear as children. And you wear it every day, and they're currently made using unsustainable materials. There's no connection as to where they're made and how they're made and all of this impact. But
they're just interesting, but they're not fast fashion. That you can, like you said about suits, you can have the uniform for a few years and they can be passed down. So did that come into it?
So I mean, a uniform can be passed down, and you could have it for a few years and pass it down. If you have a
More kids, of course, yeah.
if you have a brother or a sibling that you could pass it down to. But generally speaking, you grow so much as a kid that they end up being disposed of. When they're disposed of, they end up going to landfill, which is where 80% of all garments in the world end up. And then because they're made using synthetics like polyester, they then take 200 plus years to decompose.
Crazy.
So
that was something that can be impactful as much as
massively, because I mean, if you think of the amount of students that wear uniforms, just by changing the materials that they're made from, that's going to have a massive impact.
Yeah.
But then also looking at ways to make it more circular, so that those uniforms aren't just disposed of; they are passed on, or a secondary market is created for them, so that other parents can buy secondhand uniforms.
Yeah.
By extending their life by 9 months. That reduces the impact by 20 to 30%.
Okay, interesting. And not all heroes wear capes, which is a tagline. That's obviously where the name came from.
So in terms of, and we look at it as we've coined it uniforms with superpowers. So that's using materials that are sustainable and reducing the impact there. Carbon offsetting. So once we reduce the impact, then offsetting that impact. And then the recycling part of it, so creating a secondary market, so there's again sustainability. And then lastly, and this was inspired by a report that I'd read about absenteeism, and it was in Kenya, and they'd shown that a free uniform would reduce absenteeism by up to 62%. So lastly, what we decided to do was that for every uniform, or every child that we sell a uniform to,
just explain that, so people who can't afford a uniform are less likely to go to class.
Yeah, so this report was done in Kenya, and it essentially showed that uniforms were one of the most expensive things in regards to schooling.
Yeah.
Outside of school fees. So once they abolished school fees, it was then uniforms.
Wow.
And you would think of it,
more than transport, more than materials and books, because
I mean, like we think of it, and we think, oh, a uniform is quite cheap. But with families that are earning literally next to nothing, it's a massive expense. So they would forego buying a uniform. So for a number of schools, if the kid didn't have a uniform, just wasn't allowed to come to school. And then also the stigma of not being able to afford a uniform again meant that kids didn't go to school. So what they did, they gave out a number of uniforms. And then they tested what would happen, and it showed that 62% of kids that had no uniform before, it reduced absenteeism by 62% for kids that had no uniforms. So what we decided to do was that for every uniform that we sell a kid to, we would then give a free uniform to a child in need. So hence, by wearing Kapes uniforms, you're a hero. So that's where that whole heroes and Kapes.
Okay, so amazing. So end of 2019, you're still working Benjamin Stiggers, you have this idea, you have the name. How do you go to launching it? But also, can you just talk about where they're manufactured and how you can produce sustainable uniforms?
Sure. So in terms of where they're manufactured, so the majority is manufactured in India. So a few different places in India, and then also Nepal as well. And then with the materials and how we make it.
Maybe you went around to find them in the tuk-tuk, not at this.
Unfortunately, because of COVID, they had those travel restrictions.
Yeah.
So what we did in this case, we partnered with a sourcing agency.
Okay.
That specialise in sustainability.
Great.
So they work with a network of ethically certified factories. These are factories that have certifications with the Global Organic Textile Standard, with SEDEX, with OECOTEX, with Fair Trade, and other certification bodies.
Amazing.
And then through that network, we then chose ones that could produce the products that we needed. And then in terms of the actual materials and how we make that sustainable, was really looking at, okay, these are the materials that are used at the moment. What are the sustainable alternatives for them, and how do we, bring that into the mix?
Amazing. So, Matthew, this amazing idea, right? If you come to me as an investment, I'll be like, wow, the sustainable fashion education.
Yeah,
it's just impactful. So it was easy to get investors then.
I mean, so was it easy? I mean, it's not easy,
No.
right? Especially
People weren't throwing money at you
yeah,
at the start of COVID.
yeah, exactly. Especially during like right in the middle of COVID, and there's all this uncertainty.
Yeah.
But that initial, the initial raise went, pretty well.
It was a seed round.
It was a pre-seed round. So,
So friends and family angel, or specifically pre-seed?
so friends, family, and one angel,
Yeah.
or two angels. So one came on as co-founders. That was because they had some real experience within the international schools market, and also bring an e-learning edtech piece to the puzzle. And part of the business, so we're creating an e-learning platform so that students of schools or parents or teachers can log on and learn about the product's journey and learn about the impacts of fashion.
Specifically related to the company, yeah. Okay.
So yeah, sort of related to uniforms.
Yeah.
So that they bring that side of it, and then friends and family. One was a client, through the previous business, who really liked the idea. So
typically, can you say how much you raised?
So the initial amount, and this was just to sort of get us started. Or should I say that? I won't say how much we raised for this amount. Probably the next round.
What are you looking to raise in the seed round?
So in the next round, we'll look to raise. Depends on how we do it and whether we do it through a crowdfund or whether we do it through angel investors. I would say about quarter of $1 million.
Yeah, it's a good idea to get perspective, because usually people have references with tech stocks and things like that.
Yeah,
but it's good for the fashion industry for people to know.
So yeah, I mean, if you were starting, with our business,
how much is needed?
With our business, like for example, with Benjamin Seegers, it was a very small amount. We put our own money into it. We had clients there that we could go out to. We weren't holding any stock. It wasn't an online business; it was offline, so there wasn't that much that had to go into that. It was really about setting the business up, getting the branding done, getting the website set up. With the new business, there's a lot more that goes into the manufacturing, in terms of the actually having to manufacture products before they're sold. So you've got to put money into that, and then you've got the e-commerce platform that we're building, which is a real improvement in terms of what's out there at the moment. So a lot of cash will go into that as well.
Yeah, definitely. How are you going about that? You mentioned as well before that you did the license here in JLT and the MCC. You're set up with Nook. You have a small team. You're obviously not manufacturing the uniforms here. They're with the suppliers, but are you doing the tech build in Dubai?
So the tech build will be done in London.
Yeah.
So the guys that actually made our website, the current website, they were also based in the UK as well.
Yeah. So you're still involved in Benjamin Seegers?
Yeah. Benjamin Seegers is still going, is still running. It's slow at the moment because of COVID.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys,
people aren't wearing suits.
A lot of guys aren't wearing suits, and a lot of guys just aren't in their offices. So until that really switches around, it's going to be a slow burn. But what we started doing there is custom casual wear, so polos and more chinos and denim, custom knitwear, because that problem will still exist in terms of guys don't generally like to go and shop, and guys don't generally have the time to go and shop. That problem will still exist. So it's just looking at products that still can cater to that problem.
Okay, so you raised the money, you got the suppliers, you got the website, you have the products, and you launched in September.
Yeah.
Did you do that with a sort of one school kid, or was it with a partnership with schools? And how are uniforms bought?
So how we work is, so from September or mid-September, we started to approach schools. So a school would generally have a contract with a supplier. That contract could be anywhere from a 3-year term to a 5-year term, and then with that, parents have to. It's an exclusive arrangement, so parents have to buy uniforms from that supplier.
Good business if you can get the contract.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for us at that stage, it was okay. Now we've got the samples. We've got the business, so to speak, and it was now at that time we started to approach schools and introduce them to this, and show them that this is a way of reducing your environmental impact. It's better for everyone involved. It's better for the manufacturers, the garment workers who are paid fairly, for the environment, for the kids that are actually wearing it. And parents always want the best for their kids as well. So it's been a case of approaching schools, and you don't know which schools, how long their contracts are, and which schools have them and which schools don't. So it's a bit of
There's no website that just tells
Yeah,
you
exactly,
all the contract details.
I wish there was. So it's it's okay, just approaching schools, going from one to the other, and speaking to other people who have connections
Is it
and joining the
competitive
dots. It is. In terms of sustainability, no, because we're the only business offering this level of sustainability and transparency.
But the providers of uniforms have been there for a while.
They've been there
kind
for
of bought off other people, etc.
Yeah. So they've been there for a while.
Are they specific uniform companies, or are they retail manufacturing companies that we know on the high street that have a uniform arm?
So in the UAE, it's specific uniform companies. So whereas in, say, the UK, although I remember, like, we had uniform supply, and you would go there for certain items like a blazer, or stuff like that. But if you wanted shirts, you could go to Tesco's, or you could go to the high street.
Yeah.
Over
and
here,
pants you can get them anywhere.
Pants you can get you can get them anywhere. Whereas here, they're usually
the whole piece together.
Yeah, they're usually branded and unique, so you have to buy it from that supplier. You can't just go to a high street store.
That even makes it a better contract if you can.
Yeah. If you can get it, it's an amazing contract.
Yeah.
So competitive in the sense that you've got suppliers that have had relationships for a long time, and you've got this barrier where you've got contracts which have a long term. But in a sense of what we offer, when we speak to schools, they're amazed by it, and it's.
Is it cheaper? How does it work? What are the other benefits other than the sustainable element?
So it's competitively priced.
Yeah.
It's not cheaper, but in some cases it's not more expensive.
Okay.
So different schools have different pricing currently depending on the suppliers that they use. But what we found is that we can provide with some schools the exact same price, and that's not because that's mainly because the current uniforms are actually overpriced, despite the fact that they're made from unsustainable materials.
Well, maybe they're not having to bid or keep their prices down because these contracts aren't,
exactly.
So as competitive in terms of, they own it really.
Yeah.
And to that end, would schools not? So two things on schools. One is, would they not be more pressurized to kind of offering more options, a sustainable uniform plus a traditional uniform, if that's the right word? And then secondly, schools have been under pressure price-wise for parents, especially during these times, etc. Is this an area where they feel that they could provide value?
So in terms of the value piece, I don't necessarily think that it's a case of how can we make uniforms cheaper?
Yeah.
By that essentially would.
How much is a school uniform?
So on average, parents would spend anywhere between, we did a survey and it was 1,100 dirhams per year. But you read certain articles, and some it could be 1,500 dirhams, some 1,300 dirhams. Yeah. So they're certainly not cheap. And you wouldn't want to reduce the quality to make it cheaper. Parents that we speak to are more than happy to spend money on their kids. They want the best for their kids. They just want to know that what they're spending on is good quality. So we're not under any pressure to reduce the costs, but what we're able to do is compete with it, but produce a higher quality product that is sustainable. Sorry, the first question you asked.
Yeah, just in terms of, would the schools be able to give the parents an option? Here's Kapes, and here's the one you were already getting. So
because those contracts are exclusive, in any instance that we found, it would be a no. I wish that they had that choice, because I'm sure.
So the school in Sustainable City, who provides the uniforms there?
The school in Sustainable City.
Assuming there's a school there.
Yeah. So it's a school that we're speaking to.
Yeah.
So their uniforms are supplied. I'm not sure if I'm able to say who they're supplied by.
But there's a competitor.
Yeah, it's a competitor who supplies their uniforms currently. And yeah, we're
Good.
looking
Okay. Good to know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're looking to challenge them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So, just another topic as well. So, there's been a lot of, I think we will mention this company. There's been a lot of media coverage for a listed retail company in fast fashion in the UK. Boohoo, is that the
Yeah,
right pronunciation?
yeah.
And they've got a few well-known high street brands, which you don't need to mention. But there's been a lot of criticism of the factories in the Leicester area around pricing and stuff like that. What's your kind of take on that?
Yeah, so that's someone described it as just the smoking gun within the industry.
Mm.
So it's been going on in the UK, and I think it's got a lot of news coverage, and people know about it because it's closer to home.
Mm.
You think, oh, that I didn't know that could happen in the UK, but it happens.
Yeah.
But that,
as in, typically people would think that stuff is made in China or Taiwan, etc.
So people would think that if it's made in one of those countries, or another developing country, that their workers will be exploited, and that it wouldn't happen in the UK. But as it is shown with Boohoo in Leicester, they were exploiting workers and they're being paid lower than the minimum wage, which breaks the Modern Day Slavery Act. But this kind of thing is it's been happening and is still happening right now in a lot of countries. China being one. That's another thing that came up in terms of the Uyghur population there in the Xinjiang region, where they've been forced labor. So the cotton industry is really impacted by that. So it isn't something that surprised me, having known about this kind of thing and how it goes on in the industry.
Is this an ethical issue or a sustainable issue?
It's both. I would say it's more ethical, but the two go hand in hand, really. I mean, yes, you could provide a sustainable garment, but then you might make it unethically.
True.
And that doesn't marry.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of both, but it is more of an ethical thing. So when we look at the impacts of fashion, we're looking at it from the true cost of a garment is not just the environmental impact; it's a social impact. How are people being treated? How are they being paid? And as a brand, it's our responsibility to ensure that that kind of thing isn't happening. But as a consumer, the consumers have to vote with their wallet, and they have to support brands that are doing it the right way, and not support brands that as we've seen with Boohoo, aren't.
It's interesting because fashion is obviously going through a shift in terms of high street retail and direct to consumer, and you would have thought that would have been an opportunity to get rid of some of these legacy issues that maybe the Zaras of the world have they're too big to change all this. Whereas if you're setting up a direct consumer, then you can actually not be stuck to those old problems. Do you think that that's a kind of a missed opportunity?
So I think it's an opportunity that a number of brands are taking. And I think if you don't go down that route, then it certainly is a missed opportunity. But
it works both ways. It might need regulation at the factory side and then the countryside as well.
So I think, like, for example, I mean, there's things that could make it more mainstream, such as regulation. Such as government saying, well, there's a certain tax if you produce in a certain way. I think as an entrepreneur, getting into a business, starting a fashion business, it depends. What are you starting it for? What is the impact that you really want to have? And I think that with any business now, it has to also include that sustainable side of things.
Okay. Yeah. But this is a perennial issue from a manufacturing point of view for the fashion industry. Interestingly, a lot of people will have read the Nike memoir, the Shoe Dog book, and the criticism that they faced. And there was, before the era we're in now, there was Naomi Klein's No Logo, and it talked about factories and things like that. You would be led to believe that this has improved a lot. I know Nike have had some issues lately in certain countries, but how bad, Matthew, is the current situation in fashion?
So has it? I mean, it has improved, but there's still a long way to go. There's still a long way to go. So, um, I don't know if you'd heard of the Rana Plaza disaster, which was a factory collapse that happened in Rana Plaza, which was 2008, I believe.
Where's that?
In Bangladesh.
Okay.
And um, essentially the problem was that you've got fast fashion brands, that want to charge less and less and less. They put pressure on the manufacturers, who then put pressure on the garment workers, and pay them less, and don't fix factories, and don't do a number of things, and cut corners. And essentially the building collapsed, and there was a fire in the building. The building collapsed. The people working in there weren't allowed to leave. They were told to continue working, and then it collapsed, and over 1,000 people died. Um, that then led to certain regulations, if you like, being put in place, and certain brands signing up to accord so that this kind of thing wouldn't happen again.
It always needs something like that to trigger it.
But then, not all brands sign up, or not all brands stay honest to it. So there is so much more room for improvement. And that kind of comes back to the smaller brands, if you like, now coming into the industry or going direct to consumer, to if you're going to start a new brand, to do it in the right way, and for, as I say, consumers to support all of these brands that are doing it the right way. And it is a minefield. It's so opaque that it, as a consumer, it can be very hard. Where do you start? How do I know? But now the technology is coming out. There's technology that exists to map out that supply chain, so you can sort of know the journey of your product. And I think that's going to become more prevalent as time goes on, and then that hopefully will have a knock-on impact and improve things even further.
Great, interesting. Is child labor still an issue in clothing?
Yeah, child labor is an issue. In not just in manufacturing, but in at the material level as well. Forced labor. So as I touched on earlier, in terms of the forced labor that was taking place in China, it showed that a quarter of all cotton garments in the world were tainted by forced labor. 88 or 80% of cotton from China comes from that region.
Forced labor, and explain.
So in this particular region of China, the Uyghur population, they have these labor camps, and reports have shown that through these labor camps they're forced to work in factories and manufacture products, and work in cotton farms and things like that.
So against their will, maybe. Okay. But are they paid? Are they paid below?
I'm not sure what they're paid, if they're paid at all. But it's something to look into. It's resulted in a number of large brands saying they're not going to get cotton from that region. IKEA, I think, were the latest one. Adidas, Tommy Hilfiger, loads of other brands as well.
Good.
So it's good that there is that response to it. But then when you go back, like, should that problem have existed in the first place?
Okay. But it is good that some of these macro trends are coming together. People are more environmentally aware. People are also looking at sustainable production in many things, but they're looking at, and it's interesting that you said you're going to have an e-learning aspect to show the full journey, so to kind of educate people. People are becoming more sustainably minded, more environmentally aware. But I think there's a gap between, if you ask 10 people, is sustainability important? Probably 9 would say yes. But then when you look at their actions, there's a disconnect, and that's where there needs to be more education. For example, if on the school side of things, schools are there to educate and empower future generations. Sustainability should be like a number one concern for them, because ultimately we're educating this younger generation who are going to inherit the planet. So it should be a key thing. But when we then look at, say, uniforms, which is one of the most impactful things at a school, sometimes I'll speak to a principal and there's just no concern for it, which is a bit, I don't know, it's strange. It's like, well, I don't get why. Sustainability is important, right?
So where's the sustainable action?
Yeah.
And I think that's from from us as individuals, but relating back to schools, it's okay. Well, let's try and educate and understand what is the actual impact of it.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. I think some people will be naturally inclined. Other people, it's like the crowds and persuasion, isn't it? 1990 or whatever. Not everyone's going to act. They might be sympathetic towards the concern or towards the issue, but it's the same. There was someone on this podcast talking about energy and talked about the things you could do from a building and choosing the building with green energy and things like that. So it's similar to that. But what do you think that, going back to the teacher and the procurement in the school, like what could be done from an incentive point of view? How we know that some companies are going to go more, zero carbon and things like that. Like how can that be related to help from a procurement point of view?
Incentive wise, I mean, I kind of look at it and I'm like, what more incentive do you need, right? Like, it's good for the environment, it's better for the kids, better for the garment workers. It's better all round. It's the right thing to do. What more incentive should there be? But
these people are educational people. They choose their line of career to enhance the mind, and and to education. That's their fundamental.
Yes,
they will sleep well at night if they know that the kids are being educated well.
Yeah. So I think that making it as easy as possible. As you said, they are educators. Their focus, their skills are in educating. They're not retailers. So if we can make the process as easy as possible for them, so they don't have to do any of the work, then that hopefully smooths the process, makes it easier, makes that decision even easier. But I think one thing in terms of that education piece, not just in terms of educating, say, students, but generally, the wider population being more educated on areas around sustainability. And this leads into something that we're doing, is how do you make it easily digestible for people? Because sustainability has become such a buzzword. A lot of companies have jumped on the bandwagon that now if you ask 10 different people what sustainability means, you'll get 10 slightly different answers. So for us, what was important was, rather than just saying, okay, we're more sustainable and this is why we're sustainable, so how can we actually communicate that? So we partnered with a company called Green Story. What they did was a deep dive into our supply chain, looked at, where's the cotton cultivated, how is it transported to be ginned, and how is it, and all of the processes and steps that go into it, from all of the materials that we use and the manufacturers that we use. And then with that, they're able to then calculate the actual impact and say, well, this is how much water is used, this is how much energy is used, and this is how much emissions are used. And then with that, we can then plug in products that schools currently have and the materials that are currently used, and then plug that into our supply chain and show that this is the actual impact. And show that, okay, if you swap this polo for this polo, you'll save 2.35 kilometers of driving emissions. You will save 11 liters of water, drinking water, and you'll save 282 light bulbs powered for an hour. So that's an actual example we gave to a school a few weeks ago, where we were swapping one of their polyester polos to a recycled polyester polo. So those kind of numbers, you can actually then start to that means something. So, wow, okay, 11 liters of water, I didn't realize that. That's one polo shirt. There's 500 students and they all have 5 polo shirts, and then the numbers start to add up. And I think that piece is important, making it digestible.
You mentioned recycled, but that's not the core product that you're selling. Is it recycled?
So,
as in, are the uniforms made from recycled items?
So with some of the items we use recycled polyester. So 100% recycled polyester. The majority of our products are organic cotton. Our swimwear is regenerated nylon. So that regenerated nylon used to be old fishing nets, and then it's repurposed, and we make swimwear out of it.
See, this is interesting. I can see why you would do an online information portal on it.
Yeah. So there's so much to it. So for example, with the recycled content, so we use recycled polyester for some items,
Hmm.
but PE kits, for example, because they have for moisture wicking, for bags,
Yeah.
for rucksacks and holdalls. But
Yeah.
one of the issues with recycled polyester and why we don't use it for the majority of the products that we sell, and why we use organic cotton, is because recycled polyester comes with the issue of microplastic pollution. So when it's being washed, microplastics are cleaved, and then those end up in our waters, which then end up in fish, which then humans eat. So now there's this, one of the things that we're now finding out about within the industry is this issue around microplastics.
Yeah. And some well-known brands like Adidas and Nike produce shoes now that are from fully recycled plastic.
Yeah.
Is that similar?
So it's similar, yes. As I said, I think with recycled plastic, it's in some ways it's become a bit of a PR stunt, gimmick. And it's something people can relate to because they're like, well, I'm going to collect these amount of bottles, and then these bottles are going to be made into a product. And as I say, for some products, I think it is good. But it does come with the concern of microplastic pollution, which is something else we want to avert. And for example, with a polo top or whatever the item is, if we're going to divert bottles to make them into a product, but then that product is going to be thrown away, really soon because there's no circular, piece that exists, then it's just going to end up in landfill anyway, and it's just still going to take 200 plus years to decompose. So yeah, it's looking at the wider aspect rather than just sort of individual gimmicks.
Interesting. So just a few observations. Might end up with a question. Hopefully I can. Yeah. But if I was as passionate as you are about the sustainable industry, obviously you're an entrepreneur, but I assume that there's people in retail who maybe work for uniform companies who can turn this around. So they might be legacy producers, but they would find a sustainable producer, and then they would end up being ethically sustainably produced uniforms. And then the other kind of analysis of Kapes is this a vertical business? Is it just uniform? But you've kind of answered that by talking about swimwear and bags and gym. Like there's just so many products that you can produce for kids. Is that the kind of roadmap that Kapes has?
So there's a lot of schools in the world, and we want to work with as many as possible. So that first piece is, how do we get into as many schools as possible?
Is there one shop that sells uniforms or in Dubai?
There are, the competitors we mentioned will, sell.
They have their own stores as well.
Yeah, they'll have their stores and sell them. So that's generally where people will go to buy uniforms. The online piece of it at the moment has, there's a lot of room for improvement, which is what we're bringing to the table. Because ultimately, also from a sustainable point of view, is that as kids, I never looked forward to going uniform shopping. And as parents, you certainly don't enjoy taking your kids to go uniform shopping. If you could do it online and you knew the sizing was right and it was delivered to you next day or the day after, then that's what you would do. That's what we're trying to bring to the table, rather than having these journeys of going back and forth to the shops because you have to try things on. From a sustainable point of view, we want to reduce the amount of trips that it takes.
Yeah, interesting. So that comes into it as well.
Yeah, so we're looking at every angle of it. But going back to what you were saying in terms of expansion, that real focus is how many schools can we get into, how many kids can we impact and empower, how many free uniforms can we give away. But then when we look at other products, okay, there's airlines, hotels, other companies that need uniforms, and that could benefit from them being sustainable.
Oh wow!
So we're certainly open to it, but I really,
it's a big idea.
Yeah,
it's a big potential for a company.
Loads of potential.
Yeah.
But really focus at the moment on let's keep the main thing.
Okay.
Get into schools and empower kids.
Interesting. So I'm actually repeating your name a lot now because I got it right. So 8 years later, are you as bullish about Dubai as you were when you saw it first? And what's your view on the region in terms of emerging market?
Am I as bullish? 8.5 years later, I still think Dubai has loads of potential.
Yeah. but
not as bullish as when I first got here.
A little wiser.
Yeah, exactly right. Particularly after the last year or 9 months that we've had with the pandemic.
Yeah.
But as we can see from the restaurants and stuff like that, and it seems to be bouncing back to an extent.
Yeah.
But I think when we look around, there's still all of these buildings going up, and if it can attract, continue to attract people, then there's still a lot of potential. But regionally, where I look at it now, is Saudi Arabia. That's a place for me that we've started doing a bit of business there with Benjamin Siggers. But Saudi Arabia, I saw actually this morning on LinkedIn a client who works for a government entity there, and it's always all about investment, foreign investment. Education is the number one,
huge,
a number one industry that money's going into. So Saudi Arabia,
and even mega cities like Neom is perfect for this type of partnership.
Yeah. So it's, that's where, when I look at the potential, that's the market. That I think is like when Dubai probably was 8.5 years ago, or maybe probably even years before that.
Yeah. So
I'm excited to see what's going to happen there.
So you would, at what point would you enter Saudi? Would you like to have a base here first? Does it depend on investment, or because you're digital, it doesn't really matter?
Yeah. So we can. At the moment, we're speaking to schools in Hong Kong, Thailand, Beijing, Shanghai, Singapore, so UK. So we can work with schools anywhere. So with Saudi, as soon as it sort of opens up again, then we'll be over there and meeting with schools. And I think what's happened, as a result of COVID and the pandemic, is now these meetings you have them on Zoom.
Yeah.
So we're able to speak to all of these schools, and then that next step would be going and meeting in person.
Yeah.
But soon as it opens up, we'll be in Saudi.
Yeah. And have schools, are they changing how they think about uniforms at all with this work from home, or is there still the same demand? Or homeschooling, of course, they're all nearly back.
Yeah. So I think this year there's less.
Lower,
Demand's lower just because kids aren't at school as much. Some are working from home, and also just uncertainty, particularly at the start, as to is there going to be school. So definitely demand for this year, would have been down. But in terms of the medium and long term side of things, I don't see that changing so much. I think fundamentally, like, education and schools will always be here. While some students, parents may shift to teaching online, I think school has so much more to offer than just what you're learning as a subject. It's about interacting with other students and learning about yourself and all these things. And that's why, for me, schools will always be there, and as long as schools are there, uniforms are there, and kids will always grow. So it's one of those things that I think will be here for a long time before I'm gone.
Or long after.
After I'm gone.
Good note to finish on. Thanks very much, Matthew.
Pleasure.
I'm looking forward, well done, great idea, great execution.
Thank you.
And if only Kapes was a logo that they could wear on their uniform, we'd probably be seeing a lot more of it in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Well,
great.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And if you're a school, get in touch.
Yeah. If you're a parent, go on the website.
Yeah, capes.co. We really love to hear from
and
you guys.
The handle is not all.
So the handle on Instagram is Heroes Wear Kapes.
Perfect.
And then website is capes.co.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Great.
Cheers.
Thanks.